Okay, so everyone, strap in.
Yeah?
We're diving into some serious global politics today. Donald Trump,
Back in the White House.
back in the White House.
It's big.
It is huge, and his, first term was
A real shakeup.
unconventional, to say the least.
Yeah. America first. That was his thing.
Yeah.
And it really,
Trick things up.
yeah, with, international relations.
That's time. So,
Yeah.
naturally, the whole world is, like, buzzing about this win. What are people saying? What does it mean?
So many questions.
That's what we're here to unpack.
That's right.
So let's start with a region where I think the stakes are pretty high. Ukraine.
Yeah.
Zelensky's reaction was, well, it was long,
Yeah.
and it was positive.
Yeah, and he
Surprisingly.
even, used Trump's peace through strength
Really?
rhetoric. Yeah.
What do you make of that?
Well, I think, he's trying to be optimistic,
Sure.
maybe hoping that, Trump's focus on strength will actually translate into more support for Ukraine. But we have to remember, right, in his first term,
Yeah.
Trump wasn't exactly thrilled about,
About the U.S. aid.
all the aid going to Ukraine.
Yeah.
He even, suggested that Europe should
Pay more.
take on more of that burden.
Right.
So there's this real tension there between
Zelensky's hopes and Trump's kind of past skepticism. Yeah. So that's a powder cake.
Definitely.
For sure. Especially when you consider the other side of this whole thing, Russia. Putin's response has been, well, it's been muted, hasn't it?
It's almost silent.
It's practically silent. No congratulations.
No,
Just
wait and see.
Yeah, from the Kremlin. Classic Putin. No.
Totally classic Putin. But let's not forget the history here.
No, there's a lot of...
Remember those reports, Bob Woodward?
Oh, yeah?
About, Trump and Putin chatting after Trump left office?
The ones Trump would never.
Yeah, he refused to confirm or deny.
Yeah.
So it makes this whole wait-and-see thing
So much weirder.
so much more intriguing. What are they thinking over there?
Right.
We don't know.
And then you have Peskov, the Kremlin spokesperson, and he's talking about dialogue.
Mm-hmm.
They're open to it, but he also mentions how bad relations are.
Yeah, it's very calculated.
Super calculated.
He's saying, we're open to talking.
But you messed up.
So you better come correct.
Yeah. And with Trump and his, history of praising Putin.
And going off script.
Yeah.
Who knows what will happen?
It's a relationship worth watching, that's for sure.
Definitely.
So we've got Ukraine on edge. We've got Russia kind of playing it cool.
Mm-hmm.
What about Europe?
Well.
And NATO? How are they?
Yeah, it's mixed bag.
Really?
Yeah, you have the new NATO Secretary General.
Rutte.
Yeah, Mark Rutte. And he offered congratulations, of course, and stressed working together.
Right.
But we have to remember,
Yeah.
Trump spent years criticizing NATO.
Obsolete.
Yeah, calling it obsolete and demanding they spend more.
More on defense.
So there's a lot of baggage there.
Yeah, it's like he's trying to, get back together with an ex that he, publicly dumped.
At a party.
Yeah, it's messy.
It is messy.
Speaking of messy relationships, let's talk about the UK. Keir Starmer called Trump's win historic. He talked about this special relationship, but I don't know, something feels off
Oh, yeah.
about this whole thing.
You're picking up on something for sure. There were those reports about labor officials campaigning for Harris, secretly.
What?
Yeah, and then Trump filed that FEC complaint accusing them of, meddling.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, a lot of drama.
Backstage drama.
Behind the scenes.
Makes you wonder how special that relationship really is.
Right. And then there's Macron, super short message, ready to work together.
Okay.
But after, the brain death.
Oh, the brain death of NATO.
Yeah, who knows what that really means.
Yeah, he's like, let's try this again, but,
Be cool.
don't get any ideas.
Yeah.
And Maloney in Italy and von der Leyen, they both acknowledged the win.
Yeah, they kept it short and sweet.
Okay. A lot of wait and see, I think, coming from Europe.
Yeah, they're holding their breath, I think.
Makes sense.
But while Europe is, maybe a little apprehensive, some world leaders are, ecstatic Erdogan in Turkey. Straight up called Trump a friend.
Ooh, that's got to make NATO nervous, right?
Good day time.
They've got a history
A lot of history.
of, let's say, interesting diplomacy.
Remember that phone call in 2019 when Trump told Erdogan to go ahead with his military operation in Syria?
Oh, yeah.
Classic Trump, right. Unconventional, but it could really destabilize things.
Yeah.
Erdogan calling him a friend?
Yeah.
That could mean a big realignment in the region. And maybe not good for NATO.
Wow, that's a lot to unpack already. We haven't even, gotten to the rest of the world.
Yeah.
So, initial thoughts. What do you think about these European reactions? What does it tell us?
Well, I think Europe's in a tough spot. They need the U.S. But they're also really wary of Trump. He's so unpredictable, and that America First thing, it makes them nervous.
Yeah.
They're going to have to walk a tightrope here, balancing their interests with, keeping the U.S. happy. It's going to be interesting to see how they handle this.
So we've got a wary Europe.
Yeah.
We've got a cautiously optimistic Ukraine.
Mm-hmm.
And we've got a very poker-faced Russia.
Mm-hmm.
So let's move on and see how the rest of the world is reacting to this whole Trump comeback. Starting with, well, another leader who is pretty happy about all this, Viktor Orban in Hungary.
Oh, yeah. Orban, he's super close with Trump. And, he's got his own brand of populism going on. He called this the biggest comeback in U.S. political history.
Oh, wow.
I know, right?
Okay. That's pretty amazing.
It is.
So what's the significance of their relationship, do you think?
Well, they both share some pretty similar views. Immigration, national sovereignty, that kind of thing. This whole idea of traditional values being eroded.
Okay.
So, Orban's reaction, it kind of suggests that he sees Trump's win as like a vindication. It's like, see, we're right. And it could even embolden right-wing populist movements in Europe.
Oh, wow.
It's definitely something to keep an eye on because it could have a ripple effect.
So from cautious optimism to outright celebration.
Yeah.
These global reactions are really all over the place.
They are.
So let's move on to the Middle East.
Okay.
Another region where I think we're going to see some pretty starkly contrasting responses to Trump's win.
Absolutely. On the one hand, you've got Netanyahu in Israel. He called it a huge victory, history's greatest comeback.
Wow.
So he's clearly a fan. I mean, they really value that relationship.
Yeah, and that's interesting.
It is.
Because you think about all the controversial things Trump did in the Middle East during his first term, like moving the U.S. embassy to Jerusalem.
Yeah, big moves.
Those had huge ripple effects.
Absolutely. And it wasn't just symbolic. Those decisions, they really shifted U.S. policy in the Middle East.
Yeah.
And it had real-world consequences for, the Israeli-Palestinian conflict.
And, I mean, the whole balance of power.
Yeah, the whole region.
So now with Netanyahu and Trump both back in power, are we going to see more of that?
I mean, it's definitely possible. I guess the question is, will we see even more dramatic moves?
And what about the Palestinians? I mean, how are they reacting to all of this?
It's much more subdued. They've expressed hope for U.S. support, but...
Under Trump.
Yeah,
Sure,
really. But there's also a lot of uncertainty.
Yeah, because you think about those pro-Israel policies that Trump pushed.
Right.
And it makes you wonder, like, what does the future hold for them?
Absolutely.
It's like they're holding their breath.
Yeah, they're hoping for the best, but, also fearing the worst.
So we've got Israel celebrating.
Yeah.
We've got Palestine on edge.
Yeah, it's a real contrast.
It really shows you just how differently this whole election is playing out across the globe.
It does.
So let's shift gears a little bit and look at the Indo-Pacific region, a region that's, increasingly important in global politics. And it's one where I think we've seen these U.S.-China tensions really rising in recent years.
Definitely.
So right off the bat, you have Taiwan's president, Lai Ching-te. He offered his sincere congratulations to Trump.
Interesting.
I think that's a really delicate situation because you have China's claims over Taiwan and the U.S. commitment to its security.
Right.
Talk about walking a tightrope.
It is.
Because, I mean, Trump's approach to China in his first term was...
all over the place.
It was all over the place.
Right.
He went from confrontation to, like, trying to negotiate.
Yeah, nobody knew what he was going to do next.
And I think that makes Taiwan's position even more precarious.
Oh, yeah. They need the U.S. to kind of deter China.
Yeah.
But they also don't want to, poke the bear too much.
Right. So they're really going to have to play this carefully.
Yeah, it's a tough balancing act.
So Taiwan's in a delicate spot. What about some of the other key players in the region, like Australia and India?
Well, they've both offered congratulations and stressed those partnerships with the U.S.
Right.
Which are, really important.
Super important.
Strategically, economically, for the U.S. in the Indo-Pacific. Yeah. But Trump's America First approach, it could create some friction, especially with trade and security.
So there's potential for collaboration.
Yeah.
But also for tension.
It's like a geopolitical tango.
I like that.
Where everyone's trying to figure out the steps and hoping they don't,
step on toes.
Step on each other's toes. Exactly.
Definitely.
It's all about navigating those complex relationships.
Okay.
Finding that balance between cooperating and competing.
Okay, so we've covered Europe, the Middle East, and the Indo-Pacific.
We have.
Let's wrap up our global tour with a quick look at the Americas. starting with Mexico.
Okay.
The new president, Claudia Sheinbaum, is taking a wait-and-see approach, which I think is understandable,
Yeah.
given Trump's past threats on tariffs.
Right, on Mexican imports.
Yeah, I mean, that trade relationship,
It's vital for both countries.
totally
Any disruption would be,
bad.
bad for everybody. So she's being cautious, I think.
Makes sense.
Trying to figure out how to protect Mexico, but also, keep things okay with the U.S.
It's a tough spot.
It is.
So contrast that with Lula in Brazil, who offered Trump luck and success. It's interesting.
It is an interesting message, especially with, Trump's ties to Bolsonaro.
Right.
So it just highlights how complex South America is politically.
Sure.
There's shifting alliances, ideological divides.
Right.
And the U.S. has a history of, getting involved down there.
Yeah.
So Lula's message,
What does it mean?
maybe he's trying to be friendly, keep the dialogue open despite their differences, or maybe it's strategic.
Yeah.
He wants Brazil to be a key player in the region.
So much intrigue.
There
It
is.
seems like every reaction tells a story.
It does.
And understanding those stories
It's key to understanding the world and, the next 4 years.
of a Trump presidency.
Yeah,
It's going to be a wild ride, and we're just getting started.
we are.
We'll be back after a quick break to dive even deeper into what all this means and what we can expect in the months and years ahead.
Can't wait.
Stay with us.
I know, it's mind-boggling, right? This election is
God.
thrown a wrench into everything.
Global politics is just
Yeah.
in chaos.
You got leaders celebrating, others scrambling. Everyone's trying to figure out what a Trump presidency.
Round 2.
Yeah, what does it even mean?
It's like a geopolitical game of musical chairs,
Yeah.
but nobody knows when the music's going to stop.
Or where they'll land.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But there are some, common threads, I think, running through all these reactions.
Definitely. I think one of the biggest is this anxiety
Oh, yeah.
about America's role in the world. During his first term,
Yeah.
Trump questioned those alliances.
NATO, for example.
Yeah, he withdrew from agreements.
Right.
Really put America first, no matter what.
Yeah, above all else. So now he's back, and those anxieties are,
Through the roof.
they're back in a big way.
Yeah.
It's like everyone's holding their breath, wondering if he'll,
Stick to the plan this time.
yeah, or just go rogue again.
Who knows?
But even with all this uncertainty, I think we can still learn something
Oh, absolutely.
by looking at how specific, regions, countries are
Yeah.
reacting to this.
So what are we seeing? Well, one big theme is this uncertainty around Trump's foreign policy.
Yeah.
Is he sticking with America first, those bilateral deals over the, bigger agreements?
Right.
Will he challenge NATO again? What about Putin? Will they be buddies again?
So many questions.
World leaders are losing sleep over this stuff.
Yeah, it's like they're trying to read a book, but the ending keeps changing.
Every page.
But I do think even with all this uncertainty,
Yeah.
we can still kind of glean some insights
Absolutely.
by looking at how those regions are reacting. So we talked about Europe, right?
Yeah.
Mixed bag,
Yeah. A real mix.
cautious optimism in Ukraine.
Mm-hmm.
Russia's just kind of being quiet, watching.
Mm-hmm.
But let's zoom in a little bit more.
Okay.
What are the potential consequences?
Let's start with Ukraine. I mean, the stakes are incredibly high there.
Yeah, they're literally,
They're fighting for their survival.
yeah, against Russia.
And they need the U.S. They need that military aid, the money, the diplomatic support, everything.
But, and this is a big, but
Yeah.
Trump has a history of questioning that U.S. involvement in Ukraine.
That's right. Criticized the aid, said Europe should pay more.
Even praised Putin.
It's true.
So I get why Zelensky's trying to be positive,
Yeah.
but nobody knows what Trump's actually going to do.
It's the big question, right? Will he support Ukraine? Or will he cut them off to try and, get closer to Russia?
It's a huge dilemma,
Yeah.
and the outcome could really change things for Ukraine, for Europe,
For the world, even.
yeah, for the whole fight against authoritarianism, right?
Yeah, it's high-stakes poker, and Ukraine's got a pretty weak hand.
And speaking of Russia, Putin is playing this so well.
Yeah.
No big statements, no threats.
Just quiet observation.
He's watching every single move Trump makes.
Absolutely. Looking for weaknesses, divisions, anything he can exploit.
And, he's thinking about how to use Trump's, his fondness for Putin.
Yeah, and his skepticism of NATO.
Right.
Putin wants to weaken NATO, get that influence back in those nearby countries, make Russia a major player again. And he might see Trump as his chance.
So we've got Ukraine on edge.
Definitely.
We've got Russia playing this long game.
Mm-hmm.
Let's move to the Middle East.
Okay.
Another region where Trump's policies have been,
Huge.
yeah, really consequential.
And his return has been met with both excitement and fear, I think.
Yeah. So you've got Israel.
Right, and Netanyahu.
He's celebrating, sees this as a personal win almost.
Yeah, they share a similar worldview, They distrust international institutions. They're willing to use force. They believe they're exceptional.
And Trump did deliver on those promises to Netanyahu, like moving the embassy, recognizing Israeli sovereignty over the Golan Heights.
Yeah, so Netanyahu's probably hoping for more of that.
Maybe even bolder moves.
It's possible. But those moves, they have consequences.
Yeah.
They alienate the Palestinians, make the region less stable, and make a two-state solution even harder.
And that brings us to the apprehension.
Yeah.
The Palestinians, they're already in a tech spot.
Under occupation.
Yeah, and now they're bracing for, potentially even tougher times.
Under a Trump administration.
That's probably not going to prioritize their rights.
It's realpolitik at its, I guess, most brutal.
Strategic interests over human rights.
Unfortunately, the Palestinians are often on the losing side of that equation.
So Israel's emboldened, Palestine's worried, and the Middle East is, well...
It's a tinderbox.
Yeah, it could explode at any minute.
The potential for conflict is very high.
Let's shift to the Indo-Pacific now.
Okay.
Another region that's becoming more and more important.
And where that U.S.-China rivalry is really the main event.
Right. You think back to Trump's first term, the trade war, the military activity in the South China Sea.
Taiwan.
Yeah, he took a much tougher stance on Taiwan.
Yeah.
So will we see more of that?
Or will he try to, I don't know, maybe ease the tension a bit?
It might be too late for that.
Yeah, the relationship's pretty adversarial now.
They both see each other as threats.
And there are so many flashpoints. From Taiwan to trade to technology, that could just erupt.
That's like a game of chicken.
Yeah.
Where nobody wants to back down.
But if they crash, it's going to be bad.
And caught in the middle are countries like Taiwan, South Korea, Japan.
Right, trying to stay friends with both.
While also protecting themselves.
It's a delicate dance.
That just got a whole lot harder with Trump back in the picture.
Yeah, no doubt.
But let's not forget about the Americas.
Oh, right.
A region that I think often gets overlooked in these global discussions.
But it's so important.
Yeah, U.S. policy really affects the Americas.
Absolutely. From Mexico to Brazil to Venezuela, they all feel it.
And America first.
Yeah.
With its focus on borders, trade, countering China, that's going to have an impact.
A big one.
So we talked about Mexico's wait-and-see approach.
Right.
Lula trying to be diplomatic. But you've got other countries, too. Argentina, Colombia, Chile. They're all figuring out how to deal with this.
And don't forget Venezuela.
Oh, right, the crisis.
Political, economic. And then you add the U.S. sanctions, Trump's support for Guaido.
It's a mess.
It's complicated. But it shows how U.S. involvement can sometimes help, sometimes hurt.
So mixed bag in the Americas as well.
Anxieties, opportunities, who knows what'll happen.
It's going to be interesting to see how all this plays out.
For sure.
Over the next few years.
Absolutely.
So we've been all over the place.
We have.
Looking at these global reactions to Trump back in the White House.
It's been a ride.
It has. A lot of anxiety, some excitement, cautious optimism, even some,
outright celebration.
Yeah, it's wild.
It really shows you, global politics.
It was all connected.
Yeah, it's like this giant web. You touch one part and the whole thing's shaped.
Exactly. So, big picture.
Yeah.
What's the takeaway here? What does all this tell us about the world right now?
I think the world is holding its breath.
Yeah.
Everyone's trying to figure out what a Trump presidency round 2, what does it actually mean? We're on the edge of something big, but
we don't know what.
Nobody knows.
And that uncertainty, I think it's made worse by Trump's,
unconventional style.
Yeah, his foreign policy is...
It doesn't play by the rules.
He really doesn't.
Trade wars, ditching agreements, making friends with leaders that everyone else avoids.
Yeah, so it's less about predicting his policies, I think.
Right.
And more about understanding these bigger trends he might set in motion.
Exactly. Nationalism is on the rise. The balance of power is shifting. People don't trust institutions anymore.
Yeah.
Trump's both a symptom of all that and, maybe he'll make it worse.
So how do we even begin to make sense of this? What should we be looking for as this all plays out?
I'd say watch how these global anxieties actually turn into actions. Will Europe try to appease Trump, or will they push back?
What about China? Aggression, restraint.
Yeah, and what about those alliances? Will they break? Or find ways to work together?
And the big problems. Climate change,
Yeah.
inequality, nuclear weapons. Do those even matter anymore?
Compared to America first, that's the question.
Yeah, will he engage with these issues or just go back to isolationism?
The answer matters for all of us.
So much to think about.
Yeah, this is a lot.
This deep dive has given us a lot to chew on.
It has.
Any final thoughts? Anything you want to leave our listeners with as they, try to navigate this new world?
Well, we talk a lot about Trump's impact on the world, but don't forget,
Yeah.
the world's going to impact him too.
Oh, interesting.
He's not in a bubble. His actions will shape things, sure, but those events, they'll shape him too. It's a two-way street.
It's a good reminder that this isn't just a 4-year story.
It's much bigger than that.
It's going to keep going for years.
Maybe decades.
And we all have a role to play here.
We do.
Staying informed, talking about these issues, holding our leaders accountable.
This isn't a spectator sport. We're all in this together.
Yeah, the choices we make now.
They determine the world we leave behind.
So keep thinking critically, stay engaged, and remember,
It matters.
what happens on the world stage affects us all. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive, and we'll see you next time for another look at the forces shaping our world.